Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Jeremy Schumacher. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm the Jer in Wellness with Jer. Thanks for stopping by and checking out my channel today. Today, we are going to talk about the violence inherent in the system. We're going to talk about Copaganda and ICE shooting people and fragile masculinity. And we're going to use some critical analysis, some pop culture to sort of tease these topics apart. One of my one of my guilty pleasure modes of cinema is like an assassin movie. Um, Smoking Aces is my go-to guilty pleasure movie. I'm aware this movie is not good, and I like it anyway, mostly because Clint Mansell does the soundtrack. Let's be real. Um, but so I've been watching some assassin flicks recently, and what just hit HBO Max, which is a streaming service that I have. Shout out because it has AEW wrestling on it. Is John Wick, and a movie that also recently got added that I love, 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 and have seen a bunch of times and love it as sort of like cinema is Bronson, starring Tom Hardy. And we're going to sort of compare and contrast these films. This might be a longer video because I'm going to probably sneak in my reviews of both films, but to really talk about like what these films highlight about violence in America and specifically masculinity, state-sponsored violence as performative, and how that leads to ICE agents shooting citizens on the streets. And so if you're tuning in years from now, hello, future, hope we made it, or from a different part of the world, hey, welcome. What's happening right now in America is we have a fascist takeover. Part of the authoritarian regime has deployed customs enforcement agents, ICE, and Border Patrol agents to Minneapolis. If you're like, hey, my geography of America is not strong, but Minneapolis is not on a border, you'd be correct. Again, ICE has become sort of the secret police, the modern day slave catcher wing of the police here in America. And it's really terrible. And they shot Renee Good and murdered her. And they shot Alex Peretti and murdered him. These are our state-sponsored executions of people who are legally protesting and legally observing ICE's actions. And so there's a lot of, I think, commentary around how did we get here? How does stuff like this happen? And again, I think America's been fascist for a long time. Generally speaking, it's been towards Black and brown people. And so having two white suburban coded, I don't know if they lived in the suburbs or not, but suburban coded people, one of them was driving a minivan, shot, and video of that is not surprising, but is still shocking in a way, in a country where violence is all too often sanitized and very clean and off camera. To have that happen twice in 2 weeks is still shocking. And so I think let's look at, through the cultural norms that our movies promote, what all of this has to do with ICE and state-sponsored violence and masculinity. Other people on YouTube have done a really great job explaining what Copaganda is. So I'm not going to take a ton of time to do that. If you want to learn more about Copaganda, if you want to learn about how media sanitizes and promotes policing in America and why that's sort of a uniquely American thing, and that hasn't always been the case. Cops up until about 1970 were really derided. They're pigs, and they were like dumb, bumbling idiots. And while that's still true, that isn't necessarily how we culturally think of them. We're sort of thanks for your service a culture now, even when the service is not solving crime, shooting people's dogs, shooting mentally ill people, and generally just making shit worse. So how does this happen? What does John Wick, which is not a film about a cop, have to do? Again, ostensibly, it's a film about crime and the criminal underworld. And then how does an art house film, I would say I don't know that Bronson was an art house film. But a cinematic experience like Bronson, which isn't a pure action film, it's a biopic technically, about Britain's most dangerous prisoner, Charles Bronson. How does that sort of compare and contrast? And so again, like, if we're 5 minutes in and I haven't gotten to the movies yet. If you're new to the channel and you're like, why did you pick these films? Like, I didn't. I just watched them, and this is how my brain works. As a mental health professional, I'm constantly looking at the systems at play and sort of, again, that systemic lens, that intergenerational sort of family tree idea of how did American violence get to this point, where again we have ICE officers shooting people while recording on their cell phones. We have ICE officers performing an execution, and rather than rendering aid to the victim, counting the number of bullet holes in their body. And like, that's what's really happening here. And so how did we get here, and why is state-sponsored violence considered so different than other things? So let's start with John Wick. John Wick is the much more popular franchise. I think the film more people are going to be familiar with, the film more people have watched. The John Wick franchise has amassed over $1 billion in box office sales. The first John Wick is sort of what I'm focusing on because I haven't watched the other ones yet. I've seen them, but not recently enough to comment intelligently on them. And I hadn't watched the first John Wick in years. Again, it came out a while ago, so it just happened to be on streaming at a time where I was looking for like sort of a mindless action film. And it is, right? John Wick is a mindless action film. Overall, that's what its appeal is. It's Keanu Reeves being super cool, killing bad guys. And that's the core premise, I think, of a lot of media, and especially Copaganda, and why I think John Wick falls into the category of Copaganda is good guy with a gun killing bad guys. And so John Wick is the story of these Russian criminals. That was a smirk for the MAGA crowd to see if they still think Russia are the bad guys or not. These Russian criminals want John Wick's car. He doesn't want to sell it to them. So they break into his house, steal his car, and kill his dog. And John Wick's wife died, right? We have a classic dead wife trope here in this movie. She's not a real character. And that's not an important plot point. It only serves as a plot point. Her character doesn't really exist. And so we have grieving husband who had gotten out of the game, and now his dog died. So now he's pissed. And so the setup of the movie is there's emotional resonance in the sense that we're sad for him, right? And the thing with propaganda type movies, the thing with this type of stylized action violence in film is that we're supposed to put ourselves in the character. John Wick is male competence fantasy. And he was a loving partner, but we don't see any of that. He was a caretaker for this pet, but we barely see any of that. He had his dog for like 2 days by the time that this all happens, that the movie takes place. So again, even the dog is more of a plot point, dead puppy, than an actual character. We don't see him develop. We just instantly get to categorize him as good, loving dude because he loves a puppy. And again, like, there are bad people in the world who don't like puppies. So sure. But John Wick is not a character at this point other than grief and sadness leads to extremely, extremely violent response. And so there's no vulnerability in the grief. There's no process in the grief. It is merely, I was wronged. Now I get to enact violence on the world. And what happens in John Wick is he goes through not just who killed his dog, but this entire criminal organization, because other people are trying to kill him, because there's a bounty put on him, because it's the criminal underworld. But the setup of the movie is good guy with a gun gets to kill people who deserve it. And that's the American idea of policing, whether that's world policing with our military industrial complex, or that's at-home policing with our local police force, or again, the secret police that are extremely Nazi coded. But really, again, like not we're not copying from Nazis, we're copying from the South, we're copying from the slave catchers, which is how the police force in America came to be in the first place. And so this is very much our American history, not just Nazi Germany. And so the idea here is good guy with a gun gets to enact violence on people who are not following the prescribed order. John Wick's life is chaotic because of his emotions. Grief, he lost his wife. Sadness, he lost his dog. And those things are chaos. Violence promotes order. He's putting his life back in order so that he can move on with it. And so violence, in the purpose of order, is morally good. That's like the distillation of good guy with a gun gets to enact violence on people who deserve it to benefit the social order. That's Copaganda, right? That's propaganda that promotes policing as a moral good and a necessary thing, when it's neither of those things. When we look at statistics, when we look at how effective is policing, do they help the community or not? Do they justify the billions of dollars we spend on giving them military equipment? Like, the answer is obviously no, right? We could be spending so much more money on social services, on housing people, on social programs that would benefit the entire community. And again, like, policing in America is not just about white supremacy, but is very much about protecting the ruling class's property. Because again, property in America is more important than people's lives, because gross, because America was set up on bad principles. So John Wick is Copaganda in that sad, grieving, good person gets to enact violence on people who deserve it. And again, do I support the death penalty for people who kill dogs? Like, no, I don't support the death penalty. So like, the premise of they deserve it, so he gets to kill them, is like a wild one. And we only get here through years and years and years of normalizing violence in our culture. Like, John Wick is not suggesting that as a controversial take. Again, inconveniencing a police officer, shouting things at them, recording them, does not deserve a death sentence, right? Somebody who circled your car twice recording it is not in danger of being hit by your car. If they were, they wouldn't keep walking around it while they recorded it. And so inconveniencing people, protesting, legally observing, even the idea of obstructing their operations, which I don't think there's evidence of either of those things happening in the killings in Minneapolis. The obstruction of their duty isn't deserving of a death penalty, even in states that still have the death penalty, because again, we're kind of a gross country. That wouldn't warrant a death penalty. You don't get the death penalty for obstruction. You just don't. And so the fact that the media and news talking heads and politicians specifically are going out of their way to say this was justified shows how far gone we are in the idea that this is what a human life is worth. Like, this deserves to die. And again, I work with religious trauma, so I see a lot of this idea that, like, again, bad behavior, speaking out against authority, not being moral by following the natural order, quote unquote. Again, there is no natural order. By not following that culture's preferred order is deserving of death, is like a deeply Christian idea too, because again, doing something bad deserves punishment. And if that punishment requires, or if that punishment leads to death, then it's your fault for doing the bad thing in the first place. So this is all like, you know, it's white supremacy for sure, but it's also like deeply Protestant sort of ethic on, like, we deserve punishment. I wouldn't say Protestant, I would just say Christian, because Catholic guilt is a real thing for sure. Marty Luther, back in the day, whipping himself in his monastery, was Catholic before founding Lutheranism and sort of creating that Protestant split. So this goes back again into Christianity of morality requires punishment. And violence, stylized violence, and something like John Wick is, again, like, how that idea gets laundered from sounding pretty radical, because it is, to being pretty normalized. John Wick is cool. And again, like, there's a weird homoeroticism to this movie, I think. And we'll get into the compare and contrast with Bronson. around the idea of masculinity, because I think it plays into who's working for ICE. It is people with fragile masculinity. But John Wick is got the beard, got the long hair, which is like a little odd, right? That so many strong masculine, quote unquote, male characters in modern cinema and media have long hair. Kylo Ren, Adam Driver in Star Wars has long hair. Thor, Chris Hemsworth has long hair. Like, we have a lot of long haired dudes out here who are masculine coded, even though as a male who has long hair, I will tell you most people treat it as very female coded. It's not. Hair just grows, can be long or short. It doesn't have anything to do with gender. That's made up. But the idea of, again, like, this is what competent male a male competence fantasy looks like, is again a guy who has a full head of hair, a guy who can grow a great beard. It's a little patchy in my opinion, Keanu. I'm not taking shots. Just as somebody who can grow the big beard, I should have kept it just for this video, right? But if you want to scroll through my videos on YouTube, you'll see the beard grows out every year and then I shave it. He's got tattoos that are like aged poorly, I would say, in the modern purview of that. But we get this like weird shower scene. It's the only time we don't see him in like his suit, his killing suit, and he's got some like cross tattoos and stuff. I don't know. We didn't go like full Boondock Saints and do like the Lord's Prayer in Latin on the back or anything here. But like, again, like Christian coded, right? He's got crosses. He's got the tattoos. Common in like sort of the military idea of like, you're professional because you can cover them up, but you're not a square. You do have tattoos because you're cool. Tattoos are cool. I'll support that as somebody who has one that's mostly covered up. And then again, John Wick is eminently competent at doing violence. He takes on an army of other criminals while taking next to no damage himself. He gets hurt, but he super glues it and staples it and whatever, stitches it himself. He goes to see his vet. I've been watching a lot of assassin films. I'm not sure which plot point I'm mixing from what. I also watched Polar recently, again, like for the other. So maybe that one was the one where he stitched it up himself and goes to see his vet or whatever. But Mads Mikkelsen, sign me up. The competence here is, again, there's a criminal underworld, and they're also in theory trained, hardened criminals, and he takes them all out. You get the stylized shots of reloading his gun. You get the cool explosions. You get the soundtrack that again, the way the camera angles work and the way the movie is shot is you feel like you get to be him. He's an action hero, and aren't you cool being him, justified in your anger and acting violence on other people? And that's the way the movie is shot. Now, Bronson, much less popular film, did turn a profit, but about $2 million in box office. So like not a smash hit. Again, like I'm not doing a Bronson review because it probably wouldn't do well on YouTube. John Wick probably would. But again, I don't know how many people have seen this film. Go watch it. It's really good. It's directed by Nicholas Winding Refn, who also did Valhalla Rising, Mads Mikkelsen. But it's art house. It's a weird film. It's a biopic. This is Tom Hardy before playing Bane in Batman. This is Tom Hardy before being in Warrior and then being in Batman. But so he's bulking up. This is a role he wanted to do. He met Charlie Bronson in prison, and like Bronson was the real life Charles Bronson. Was so enamored with it, he shaved his mustache off and sent it to Tom Hardy to wear in the movie. So like, real guy, known as England's most violent criminal, went to jail for a small-time armed robbery, and then has pretty much been in jail the rest of his life because he keeps kidnapping other inmates or kidnapping, like holding hostage members of the police force or the people who are running the whole establishment where he's at. He's destroyed a ton of prison property in protests and done various things. He's like, I don't know, a big deal in Britain as like a celebrity. I would I don't know. I didn't ask a British person this. I would assume sort of like how we think of like Dahmer, not that Dahmer's still alive, but like notorious because of those types of things. There's a better Dahmer, famous British serial killer that is probably a better reference. But like they were housed together, right? Bronson and the guy who killed a bunch of pedophiles in vigilante justice. I had to think about my use of the word justice there, but the Bronson, again, real person. The movie's incredibly violent, but the movie is not stylized in its violence. Oftentimes it's quiet. There's no soundtrack playing while Bronson gets into a fist fight. The only time it sort of veers into that is when he's out of prison and he's doing like the bare knuckle bronzing. He was born Michael Peterson. He changed his name later after getting out of prison the first time, as he was doing bare knuckle boxing, sort of illegal underground boxing as a way to make money. One of the boxing promoters like, you need a better name. How about Charles Bronson, who was a big action star at the time? So Michael Peterson took that name and went by Charlie Bronson from then on. He changed his name a couple more times, once because he got married and for religious reasons. So whatever. But yeah, he's known as Charlie Bronson. He was also in prison with the Krays at one point. At least one of the Kray twins, more notorious gangsters and notorious prisoners in the British from Britain, and also Tom Hardy movie, the movie Legend. Tom Hardy plays the Kray twins. And so again, Bronson's like a well-known figure there, a notorious figure there, as opposed to maybe being like worldwide renowned. Again, it's kind of a weird celebrity status of like most violent criminal, which I would guess in America is never going to reach celebrity status because we're a police state, and so obviously we're not going to ever sort of follow that celebrity. Charles Manson maybe was like the last one that really hit that celebrity status like that. Although Luigi Mangione has some celebrity status. It's just different time. So Bronson was in prison in like the 80s till now. And so, yeah, the film sort of follows his barely his early life, but basically getting into prison, and then his prison life is what the movie has tracked and followed. And so Bronson has spent a ton of time in solitary confinement. He basically lures people into situations in prison where he can hold them hostage, and he makes wild demands about getting a helicopter and tea and whatever else. And he's covered himself in butter to make it hard for the guards to grab him. He's used art supplies and paint to make himself difficult to wrestle back into confinement. And so he just gets put in solitary confinement a lot because he's a danger to other people, and he's a danger sometimes to himself. He has one suicide attempt in prison. So, and again, like that's coming from the prison. I don't know how accurate that is or not. I'm just sharing to build some context here. But again, the violence in the film, while being overt and explicit, is not glorified at all. It's seen as sort of sad and depressing. There's no character arc where John Wick enacts violence as a part of, I would say, growth, or at least resolution to a conflict. Bronson stays in sort of this late teens, early 20s developmental stage where he's just violent because he can't handle his emotions. It's like a flip gets switched and he goes mad. And I think that's how a lot of people who don't have sort of distress tolerant skills and basic emotional management feel. Like that 0 to 60 thing is like, well, there's lots of signs in your body and in your brain that you're just not aware of or able to slow down enough to act differently. But that's how Bronson talks about it when he writes, and when in real life he's talked about it, is like he feels like he just goes mad. He goes to a different place and then he does violence and then he comes back. And so the film is, again, like you hear the clubbing of the billy clubs, you hear sort of like skin on skin hitting thud sound, but it's not like the cool tings of the bullets and the satisfying sound effects of stylized action films. It's just sort of like dull and becomes repetitive. Again, he fights guards over and over and over again and like doesn't accomplish anything. In the movie Bronson, the one accomplishment that sort of gets shown is how much destruction he does when he gets onto the roof of one of the prisons. I think it was Broadmoor. and destroys a bunch of stuff, costing the government a lot of money. And again, like as sort of this rebel rapscallion figure, you're like, stick it to the man. But like, it doesn't accomplish anything. He's not really asking for reform. He's not like really doing anything. He's just acting out. He's a petulant child in an overgrown man body. And one of the things that Bronson gets really serious about in prison, because he spends so much time in solitary confinement, is fitness. And so he wrote a book on like fitness in confined spaces. And it does seem to be one of the things that that's provided structure for him in a way that has kept him relatively sane and somewhat functional even into his later age here in prison. Is like his fitness routine has provided structure in an otherwise unstructured time where he's not getting to go outside, he's not getting to interact with other inmates. And so again, like he's buff. Like this is one of the roles that Tom Hardy prepped for being Bane. I think technically there was a gap here, and Warrior was maybe what he really did. This was not like Tom Hardy at his most jacked, but like he's bulky, he's big. Again, like the idea of John Wick being like male masculinity fantasy is odd because like Keanu's kind of a frail, not frail, but like smaller dude. He's not jacked, he's not muscly, he's not ripped and toned. He's fit without being like hyper masculine. Bronson is hyper masculine. He's muscly. He takes his shirt off. There's a scene in the film where his job is to take tea around to the prison, and one of the guys comments on his muscle, and so he like very slowly puts his fists up and flexes, and it's odd. It's weird. And like again, the movie doesn't glamorize violence at all, and it doesn't do anything for Bronson as being like this masculine figure other than showing like he's a small petulant child in this muscly body. And so the one time we sort of see him grapple with his own vulnerability is when he's in psychiatric prison, and they don't fight with him. They just put him on like a muscle relaxer or a tranquilizer is the word I was looking for there. They tranquilize him. And so he's like drooling on himself, and he can't think very clearly, and he certainly can't fight anyone because they're not like playing games there. And so he hates the psychiatric hospital and the prison ward there because he's not in control of himself. In the sense that he's not in control of his body, so he can't use it for violence. And so we see this character on loop, and we see violence as developmental delay. We see it as stagnant. We see it as repetitive and boring and not accomplishing anything, and really like deserving of pity or scorn. Whereas again, John Wick is cool and competent, and we want to be like him. That's the pinnacle of masculinity. What is real life masculinity, not a made up character, but somebody who's based on real life. A biopic of a life of violence is stunted growth, sad, repetitive, petulant child. And again, I think, where does that come out for what's going on today? Well, like, I think people who fall for Copaganda, I think people who are drawn to the violence of policing or military service or working for ICE, DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, put out the way they advertised joining ICE was promoting order, protect our country from illegal immigrants, rounding up the worst of the worst, right? Rapists and criminals and drug lords. That's again not who's being rounded up. Just to be clear, like the U.S. government makes regular deals with drug lords because we're not actually interested in stopping drugs from being in our country. If we did, we would have prosecuted the Sackler family, who are the single greatest contributor to the opioid crisis and why fentanyl is a thing in the first place in our country. So fuck the Sacklers. But again, it was this promotion of order, and then it was, we'll give you a bonus. We'll give you pay off schooling, like all the things that should be normal and paid for by the government in any functional country. ICE was offered, and again, politicians get way better benefits than the average worker. Like, again, we're a poorly designed society. So they're throwing all these things that we should have anyway, and then offering, but the selling point is like, you get to enact violence on the bad people. it was like an army of one. I don't for Americans, like it was the U.S. Army's old commercial slogan was an army of one. And it was a guy in face paint and he's got his gun and he's running through a river and he's jumping out of a helicopter and he's doing all the cool shit you see in movies. And that's sort of what ICE was trying to do too. Um, and again, it's performative masculinity. It's you sad, strange little man. You aren't accepted in society because you're weird or you're odd or you can't follow social norms or you voted for Donald Trump 3 times or you think, you know, MMA is cool. I don't know. You listen to Joe Rogan's podcast too much. And so you're an outcast. And so here is a way for you to enact violence in the promotion of order against people who make you feel emotions. And because they make you feel emotions, you're mad. And because you're mad, you're justified in enacting violence, right? The guy who shot Renee Good, after shooting her, walked away and said, "What a fucking bitch." And what did she say? She said, "It's all right, dude. I'm not even mad at you." Right? Like she was moving her vehicle after being told to move her vehicle. She was following an order gotten from someone else. She wasn't chaos. She wasn't making him feel small overtly, but she wasn't also respecting his show of power and his performative masculinity and his authority. And that made him feel small. Right? And it's this idea of like authority and power in America. I talk about this a lot in the church when I'm working with religious trauma, but the idea that respect for some people means I will respect you as humans, I will respect you as a fellow human. And for people in authority, respect often means you need to respect my authority or I won't treat you like a human. And that's what authoritarian is. That's what this regime is all about, is we've othered this group, immigrants, trans people, poor people, right? Protesters, the radical left, all these things we've othered. And because they're not respecting our authority, we can now not treat them as humans. And that's not new in America, but again, it's shockingly overt. It's explicit. Trump yelling they're eating dogs on the campaign trail when like there's just a right-wing talking point, a conspiracy theory and a silly one at that was just deeply racist. And so the whole reason they're in Minneapolis in the first place is because a right-wing podcaster went to a bunch of daycares and they didn't let him in, and he said, "Oh, what are they hiding? These Somalians must not be actually running daycares. They're running a fraud." And like Minnesota's been prosecuting a fraud case for a couple of years that was run by a white lady. This is old news, and it wasn't tied to Somalians at all. And it's just white supremacy. And because the right-wing media echo chamber, the media sphere over there is just propaganda, they don't need things to be factual. They don't need real journalism. If you're interested in protecting children, you don't want random podcasters going to kids' daycares or schools and recording. Like, that's insane. That's insane. And so that all served because it was trending in the right-wing media sphere, because it was getting some traction in the media sphere. National news too, this old news about fraud that had happened, propagated by a white lady, tied the Somalian thing to immigrant thing to then ICE got to go in. And they picked Minnesota, which was like dumb and bad because Minnesota is actually well organized after doing the George Floyd protests a few years ago. So it's probably the worst city they could have picked. And it's clearly not about immigration, right? Because immigrants, documented or undocumented in the Twin Cities, is like 130,000 estimated. Whereas it's millions of people on the southern border, right? Like if you wanted actual border patrol and international customs enforcement officers to be working, it'd be close to the border, but those are red states. And so again, this is about authoritarianism, the immigrant narrative that is just white supremacy in different language is just a false premise. This is about growing authoritarian control and getting the base used to seeing horrific things as the cost of doing business. And again, how we get here is through, it's okay that John Wick kills 40 some people, only one of whom killed his dog because he got his feelings hurt. and we see, agents executing people because somebody didn't respect their authority. He was licensed and legal to be carrying and had a gun, and that little bit of threat towards their masculinity, even after he'd been disarmed, made them feel bad. The small little man spraying pepper spray at a woman that he just pushed to the ground, that Alex Preddy then blocks with his other hand, holding up a phone, putting his hand up. Like, we can see he doesn't have a gun. He's not a threat to the officer, but he's a good dude. He's standing up for women. He's being brave and courageous. And for somebody who's a tyrant, that's maddening, right? Bronson didn't attack other people who were um, weaker than him. He wasn't a bully as portrayed in the movie. It does seem that's true in real life based on some family interviews that I read of his. That fighting was a challenge for him, and again, he attacked other inmates sometimes who, depending on what their crime was. He tried to kill a pedophile when he was in the psychiatric hospital. So again, like there was, but it was small-minded masculinity too. He also attacked somebody who made a pass at him, and that made him feel bad about his masculinity because he wasn't gay. So the fact that a gay man hit on him made him angry, and then he beat that guy up. So like that fragile masculinity is, again, like there's so many different ways that it can be fragile. And so, these ICE agents think they're John Wick, and they're counting bullet holes and think they're badasses. And what the rest of the world sees and what is in reality going on is not cool John Wick violence, but is sad, strange little man Bronson violence. And again, like Bronson hits that home in the movie. And why I say it's kind of art house is because, I mean, this is Tom Hardy before Tom Hardy was a household name. They just let Tom Hardy go, which is why I think it's such a good movie. Like, I love Peaky Blinders because Alfie Solomons is such a good character. Letting Tom Hardy just go with the character is a lot of fun. But there's cut scenes in the film that sort of interrupt the flow. Again, it's not just like this straight narrative of his life, where he's a character on a stage and he's narrating his life, and it's this back and forth. When it's shown that we can be in his place, he's performing. He's got makeup on, stage makeup. He's playing a character. He's doing a bit. And the audience is back here laughing sort of lightly. It's not very funny stuff, but it's performative. And so when we're invited to be Bronson, be the character of Charles Bronson with him, when the movie is shot that way, he's being weird. He's odd. And it's performative, and it's not that funny. And so we're invited into joining not in his violence, but in his weirdness. And again, I think that's so transgressive in American culture for like men to be a certain way. John Wick says masculinity is calm under pressure. It's cool. It's collected. It's highly efficient. It's man of action. And Bronson says masculinity under pressure is weird and performative and odd and fake and doesn't stand up under scrutiny. It's sad and deserves pity. It doesn't belong in society. And I think that's so triggering for men who do have fragile masculinity, who are uncomfortable with sort of where they fit in society. They're trying to be John Wick, but they're Bronson at heart. And again, like I'm not throwing shade at weirdos. Like, there's a thing in our house that says, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, be kind to the earth, be kind to animals, be kind of weird, read a book. And that celebration of humans as diverse and interesting, and we're all a little bit weird, and that's awesome. Is cool, is masculine if you need to gender it. It's feminine if you need to gender it. Again, like that's just human. As a guy who is, I don't fit a nice, neat little box. Look at me, I'm neurodivergent. But like I hit a lot of the cues, the check boxes on masculinity. I'm 6'3", 210, have a full beard, grow a full head of hair still at age 37. I played Division I sports. I was highly successful athlete. I've coached collegiate sports, highly successful program, lots of wins under my belt. I've done the things that society said are masculine. I have children. I've reproduced. I'm a homeowner. I own my own business. I'm successful male, as society would describe that. And I work with emotions. I'm a therapist. I'm a talk therapist. We talk about feelings, right? We process things. We take our time. We hold space. Um, I do relationships. I'm a marriage therapist, right? Like the stuff that I do is, again, I would argue, like deeply transgressive to what fragile masculinity wants masculinity to be. The I'm soft and gentle. I don't raise my voice. It's feedback I got most as a coach was, you never yell at your players. That's so weird to see. Yeah, because it does make them play better. And every coach I had in my life, always male, always got my face and screamed at me. And like, that isn't how you improve performance. So, yeah, like I occupy sort of the weird space where I'm passing as what society says masculinity, even like successful in what society says masculinity, and that's not who my authentic self really is. Like, I'm a competitive guy. Yeah, I like sports and I play them, but like I took a shot earlier at like guys who like MMA, and I love pro wrestling. Pro wrestling as performative, pro wrestling as drag, pro wrestling as opera, you know. That's my love of the art of pro wrestling, of the storytelling. It's not the cool stylized violence. It's not just the moments. It's the friendship. It's why Hangman Adam Page is one of my favorite examples of healthy masculinity. That's a separate video if I want to talk about healthy masculinity in pro wrestling. But again, so it's interesting. It's interesting for me as a therapist. Certainly, it's interesting for me as lived experience of being male, identifying that way, and being coded male, being raised male, and like, again, what I see as performative masculinity, I've done. Not necessarily because I think the performance is important, because like socialized that way successfully, and then I see how silly it is. Like, I see the right wing talking heads as being like not masculine, right? Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh use so much beard dye, it's appalling. Donald Trump wears more makeup than any other. I don't know that any other president. Again, it used to be very in vogue for white men in power to wear wigs and powder their noses, not just cocaine, but that was in vogue for a while too. The again, like JD Vance wears eyeliner, like it's a very non-masculine group of dudes. Jordan Peterson cries all the time, and like, I'm not somebody who judges people for crying. You can cry, feel your feelings. It's great. It's your body's natural response to a stimuli. Let it happen. But like, it's weird, it's performative, it's over the top. It needs to be almost hyper in its frequency and intensity to make up for its lack of perceived masculinity. These are just like the softest group of people. It's they're 10-ply toilet paper. It's cooked carrots. They're not strong, hard men. Like, Joe Rogan is maybe the one who's most closely aligned to perceived masculinity in our culture because of his connection to MMA. And again, he's a reality TV host. He's not an MMA fighter, but there's that, like, whatever, strongest kick ever measured or whatever he's claimed to fame is. But like, he's a short king who is bald and can't grow a good beard and is on like way too much hormone. He's on too much gender affirming care, so it messed up his rib cage and he looks all weird. Yeah, they're like sad, strange little men performing masculinity and taking out their own fragility on other people. They're bullies who have daddy issues. So they're not deserving of respect in any way, shape, or form. And like, again, is the fragile masculinity thing is tired. Research on it shows it's about 10% of men have, like, I think it's 3 or more toxic masculinity traits. Like, this is a small percentage of dudes, but like, again, most of us out here who like raising our children and enjoy having our pets and are good partners are, you know, the quieter, less vocal parts, the guys who form their podcasts where they get to like teabag each other and be frat bros are loud, obnoxious douchebag minorities, and they're just fragile and threatened by the world existing in a way that doesn't prioritize them. So I don't know. I didn't land on a solid conclusion here, other than like, yeah, like the cool media of our time shows a lot about what gets normalized in our culture. The idea that John Wick is still a successful franchise and Bronson wasn't a hit shows that like our ideas of violence can only exist in this certain way. Violence is appealing when it looks like this, and people want to then go and enact it because they're taught it gets to be like this. And then the reality isn't that. From MASH to Jarhead to any number of media depictions of people coming back from war, we know that's pretty horrific. I remember Peaky Blinders, even Peaky Blinders is a show about, you know, a cool coded characters crushing psychic damage from being at war, like the psychological harm of his PTSD and his life of violence following him. So yeah, it's interesting. Again, I was a professor for a while, an adjunct professor, but I worked in higher ed, putting together like a course on the psychology of superheroes. And I think I didn't get to do it this way, but like there was a version of the class where it was just looking at different iterations of the Joker throughout history, and what does the Joker and his behavior say about what has become normalized in society. So I do think this media analysis is relevant to the way culture writ large works, and again, propaganda gets normalized, and how things that sound extreme when you word them bluntly get sort of laundered into being the cultural norms. So go watch Bronson. It's a much better film than John Wick. You can go watch John Wick too. Again, I watched it as like guilty pleasure, sort of turn your brain off mindless action movie. And I because I watched them in such close proximity to each other, the juxtaposition just became really apparent to me. And I was like, hey, there's a video I can make. That's not just a straight review. I'll probably watch John Wick 2. I've seen it before. I don't think I've ever seen John Wick 3. There's a fourth now. I've definitely not seen that. But they're on streaming, and I sort of have that soft spot for action films. So no judgment if you're a John Wick fan. But again, being aware, being critical, being savvy with what we're allowing, what propaganda, because we're all taking propaganda in, where are we getting it from, and what purpose does it serve, is, you know, you don't have to analyze everything all the time. I get into that headspace where like, man, I should just maybe watch a movie for fun instead of thinking about what I can say about it, or what it says about me, or what it says about the culture, or whatever. So yeah, it's good. Protect your peace and have some space where you can just turn your brain off and enjoy stuff. And it's good to be aware from time to time and have that analysis. When we see violence enacted in the way that it has been in Minneapolis, it's good to be critical of where that comes from and who participates in normalizing that. So yeah, that's what I got today. Drop down in the comments. Let me know what else you would like me to talk about. If you think I should see John Wick 4, because I don't know that I'm planning to. I'll probably watch John Wick 2 and then be like, oh yeah, this diminishing returns on a series like this. Smoking Aces has the sequel too, and I don't think I've seen it. So, you know, this genre, while being like sort of junk food, comfort food for me, as for media anyway, is diminishing returns. So yeah, drop it down in the comments if there's something you want me to do a review of. Let me know. Let me know how terrible my shadows are. I'm still playing around in our recently recarpeted and painted basement about where my setup's going to be. I will say the thing about the green screen that was nice was I just let it stay up all the time. And it was nice not to move stuff around or do my lighting differently. So yeah, I like to collaborate. So let me know what you're all dealing with. Drop down in the comments, like, subscribe, all that stuff helps. And take care of yourself. Take care of somebody else. Peace.